My beloved child, stay with me, because the surprising news approaching your house is not arriving in the way you expect, and the moment you understand what heaven has been quietly arranging around you, you may finally realize why so many strange pieces of your life have refused to make sense until now. Don't look away now. There is a reason these words found you at this exact moment. Imagine Archangel Michael standing at the threshold of a chapter you thought would never open, carrying not fear, not confusion, but a message wrapped in a mystery that has been unfolding behind ordinary days, unanswered questions, unexpected delays, and those quiet moments when you wondered whether anything was actually changing. Something has been moving. Something has been aligning. And what comes next changes everything, because the surprising news coming into your house is connected to something you once asked for when nobody else could hear you. You may have forgotten the exact night. You may have forgotten the exact words. But your heart remembers. There was a moment when you became completely quiet and wished for one clear sign that your waiting had meaning. You did not need a spectacle. You simply wanted reassurance that your story had not stopped. And now, in this cinematic message, heaven seems to whisper, it did not stop. It was being rewritten where you could not see it. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the greatest revelation is not merely about what is approaching your house, it is about why it could not arrive earlier. Look carefully at the symbolism surrounding a house. A house is more than walls, windows, doors, and rooms. Spiritually, it represents the place where your private life lives. It holds conversations nobody outside has heard. It holds memories attached to ordinary objects. It holds laughter that disappeared into the walls and tears wiped away before anyone entered the room. It is where you remove the mask you sometimes wear before the world. So when Archangel Michael says surprising news is coming into your house, the symbolism reaches deeper than a physical doorway. Something is approaching the private part of your life. Something is coming toward the place where you have carried questions silently. Don't skip. There is another layer. The door matters. For a long time, you may have imagined that you were standing outside a closed door, asking when it would finally open. But the mystery is that you were never outside the door. You were inside the house, and something meant for you was traveling toward it. That changes the entire picture. You were not abandoned outside your blessing. You were being prepared to recognize it when it arrived. This is where the story begins. Somewhere in the invisible architecture of this symbolic story, a messenger is moving through a corridor carrying news that bears your name. Not someone else's name. Yours. There is no confusion about the destination. And although you cannot see the messenger yet, you have already noticed the first echoes of movement. Perhaps your thoughts have recently returned to something you believed you had finished thinking about. Perhaps an old dream has suddenly felt alive again. Perhaps you have felt strangely ready to release something you once struggled desperately to hold. Perhaps you have noticed that silence no longer feels empty, it feels expectant. These things do not have to predict supernatural events to carry meaning. Sometimes the deepest spiritual shift happens when your heart becomes ready for a possibility it previously could not receive. Your answer is closer than you think. But listen carefully, because here comes the first emotional twist. The surprising news is connected to something that once disappointed you. Yes, the very chapter you thought had taken something away from you may have secretly created space for what comes next. That delay taught you discernment. That closed door redirected your attention. That unanswered question strengthened something inside you. That season when nobody seemed to understand you forced you to hear your own heart more clearly. You thought nothing was happening because nothing visible was happening. Yet roots grow in darkness before anyone sees a tree. Seeds split beneath the ground before green appears above it. Dawn begins changing the sky long before the sun crosses the horizon. Stay with me. Your life has had underground seasons. You have lived through chapters where growth was happening beneath the surface. People looking at you may have assumed you were standing still, but they could not see the internal rearrangement. They could not see how much stronger your boundaries became. They could not see how your standards changed. They could not see how your heart learned the difference between attention and genuine care, between noise and truth, between temporary excitement and lasting peace. And now something approaching you requires precisely the person those hidden seasons created. Don't look away now, because this is where Archangel Michael's symbolic presence becomes powerful. Michael is traditionally imagined as a figure of courage, protection, clarity, and unwavering strength. In this story, he is not arriving to frighten you. He is standing beside the doorway as a symbol that what enters your next chapter must respect the person you have become. The old version of you might have opened every door simply because somebody knocked. The new version listens. The old version might have chased every opportunity because it feared missing out. The new version understands that what belongs in your life does not need to destroy your peace to earn your attention. Something huge is waiting for you, but it does not require you to abandon wisdom. In fact, wisdom may be exactly how you recognize it. There is a sound in this story now. Not thunder. Not chaos. A knock. Quiet at first. Almost easy to miss. And this is important because the greatest changes in life rarely announce themselves with dramatic music. Sometimes they begin with a message. A conversation. A phone call. A letter. An unexpected invitation. A person's changed attitude. A possibility you had stopped considering. A simple sentence that suddenly rearranges the future. Imagine standing inside your symbolic house and hearing that knock. Your first instinct might be hesitation because you remember all the doors you opened before that led nowhere. But something feels different this time. There is peace behind the uncertainty. There is clarity beneath the surprise. There is no pressure demanding that you become someone else. Stay till the end, because the identity of what stands beyond that symbolic door is only one part of the revelation. The bigger secret concerns what it carries. It carries evidence. Evidence that your waiting changed you rather than wasted you. Evidence that the nights you thought were empty were building endurance. Evidence that your ability to keep going when nobody applauded you became part of your preparation. And there is something else. The package does not contain what you originally requested. It contains something different. Something deeper. That is the first once-in-a-lifetime revelation. Sometimes the answer that transforms your life is not the answer you imagined. You asked for one door to reopen, but perhaps life was preparing an entirely different hallway. You asked for someone to recognize your worth, but perhaps the real transformation was learning to recognize it yourself. You asked for immediate clarity, but perhaps the waiting taught you to stop depending on external certainty. What comes next changes everything, because once your inner foundation changes, the same world begins meeting a different version of you. The person who once accepted crumbs may now recognize abundance. The person who once confused intensity with destiny may now recognize peace. The person who once feared endings may now understand that some endings were entrances wearing unfamiliar clothing. Don't skip, because the surprising news coming toward your house carries one sentence that you have needed to hear for longer than you realize. The chapter you thought defined your future was never the final chapter. There is more. Much more. And somewhere between what left and what arrives, you became someone capable of holding what once would have overwhelmed you. That is why the timing matters. That is why it could not arrive when you demanded it. That is why some doors stayed silent despite everything you tried. It was not always rejection. Sometimes it was sequence. A story told out of order makes no sense. A story revealed at the right moment suddenly makes every earlier scene meaningful. And your story is approaching one of those scenes now. There is another room inside this symbolic house, and very few people have ever been allowed into it. Stay with me, because this room represents the memories you do not explain anymore. It contains the plans you stopped talking about because you grew tired of people questioning them. It contains the version of you that once believed something beautiful was possible before disappointment taught you to lower your expectations. There is an old chair beside a window in this room, and on that chair rests a folded piece of paper. Imagine opening it. On the first line is something you once wanted. On the second line is something you once lost. On the third line is something you learned. And the fourth line is blank. Why? Because that line belongs to what happens next. Don't look away now. The blank line is the mystery. You spent so much time rereading the first 3 lines that you almost forgot the story was still being written. The surprising news approaching your house is not coming to erase your past. It is coming to place your past into a larger context. There are things you understand now that you could never have understood then. There are people you no longer need to convince. There are battles you no longer need to replay. There are questions whose answers no longer control your peace. And this is where the story begins again, not because your previous chapters were meaningless, but because they prepared your eyes to see what ordinary vision would overlook. Picture Archangel Michael walking through this room and stopping beside that blank line. In this fictional spiritual scene, he does not write on it. He simply points toward the window. Outside, morning is beginning. The horizon has not fully changed yet, but a thin line of light has appeared. This is spiritual symbolism at its deepest. Before the entire landscape changes, one line of light appears. Before the whole answer becomes visible, one clue arrives. Before the new chapter becomes undeniable, one unexpected moment shifts your direction. Your answer is closer than you think. And the surprising news may begin as something small enough that the old you would have dismissed it. That is why you must listen differently now. Not anxiously. Not fearfully. Attentively. There is a difference. Anxiety searches everything for proof that something is wrong. Attention simply notices what is true. You do not need to force signs into ordinary events. You do not need to treat every coincidence as a prophecy. The deeper invitation is to become present enough to recognize meaningful opportunities when they genuinely appear. Something huge is waiting for you, but huge does not always enter wearing a crown. Sometimes it enters quietly and grows. A conversation becomes a connection. An idea becomes a project. A decision becomes a new direction. A moment of courage becomes the turning point you only recognize months later. Stay till the end, because there is a reason the title says the news is coming into your house rather than simply coming to you. The house symbolizes more than privacy. It symbolizes foundation. Whatever arrives next is meant to touch your foundation. Perhaps it changes how you see yourself. Perhaps it changes the emotional atmosphere around you. Perhaps it brings clarity into an area that has been uncertain. Perhaps it reminds you that you still have permission to hope. But here comes the second twist. Before the news reaches the doorway, something leaves through the back door. Something old. Something heavy. Something you have carried so long that you forgot you were carrying it. Maybe it is the need to understand why somebody acted the way they did. Maybe it is the belief that you missed your only chance. Maybe it is the habit of measuring your future by your past. Maybe it is the quiet assumption that because something has taken a long time, it will never happen. Watch the symbolism. One door opens outward while another prepares to open inward. Release and reception are happening in the same house. This is why some recent emotional changes may have surprised you. Things that once triggered a strong reaction may no longer have the same power. Memories that once pulled you backward may now feel distant. You may suddenly feel tired of carrying explanations nobody requested. That is not emptiness. It may simply be maturity creating room. Don't skip. The room must change before the new furniture arrives. The soil must loosen before new roots can spread. The hands must release what they are gripping before they can receive anything else. And your hands, symbolically, are opening. Not because everything has been easy. Because you finally understand that holding onto what is finished does not honor what it once meant. You can appreciate a chapter and still turn the page. You can love who you were and still become someone new. You can remember what happened without living inside it forever. What comes next changes everything because the surprising news does not meet you as the person you were. It meets you as the person you became. That distinction is enormous. Imagine that knock again. This time louder. Not threatening. Clear. You walk toward the door. Your hand reaches for the handle, but before you open it, you notice something carved into the wood: receive without fear. You stop. Why would those words be there? Because sometimes receiving is harder than asking. Asking happens when we know what we lack. Receiving requires us to believe we are allowed to hold something different. You may have become so accustomed to waiting that movement itself feels unfamiliar. You may have become so accustomed to solving problems that peace feels suspicious. You may have become so accustomed to disappointment that good news requires adjustment. Stay with me. This message is not asking you to believe that every dream will magically appear at your doorstep. It is inviting you into something more useful and more powerful, the possibility that your future does not have to repeat your past. That alone can change a life. And in this cinematic scene, Archangel Michael places his hand over the inscription and says, in essence, you learned how to survive uncertainty, now learn how to receive possibility. Don't look away now. Behind the door is not merely an object. There is a person holding an envelope. Their face is hidden by the brightness outside. You cannot identify them yet. That is intentional. The messenger matters less than the message. The envelope has no address except one word, home. And suddenly you understand why this news had to come here. It needed to find you where you were most yourself. Not in the crowd. Not while performing strength. Not while trying to impress anybody. At home. Internally. Privately. Authentically. You take the envelope, but you do not open it immediately. Something inside you already knows that whatever is written there will divide the story into before and after. This is where the story begins. Your fingers touch the edge of the paper. There is a symbol pressed into the seal, a key beside a wing. The wing represents guidance. The key represents access. Together they symbolize guided access to something previously closed. But remember, not every closed thing needs opening. Wisdom decides which key belongs to which door. That is why your transformation mattered first. An earlier version of you might have used the key on the wrong door. Now you recognize the difference between something that merely attracts you and something that aligns with the life you are trying to build. Your answer is closer than you think. You break the seal. Inside is not a long letter. Only 3 lines. The first says, "What left created space." The second says, "What waited created strength." The third says, "What arrives will require both." And suddenly every previous symbol connects. The empty room. The blank 4th line. The dawn outside the window. The 2 doors. The open hands. The key and wing. This was never simply a story about receiving surprising news. It was about becoming ready for the life that follows it. Something huge is waiting for you. Yet the revelation continues, because there is something on the reverse side of the paper you have not seen. Stay till the end. Turn it over. There is a date missing, a name missing, and a destination missing. Why would heaven's symbolic message leave those details blank? Because this story is not meant to imprison your future inside a prediction. It is meant to awaken you to possibility. You still choose. You still act. You still discern. You still decide which doors deserve your energy. The mystery does not remove your agency, it restores it. And perhaps that is the most surprising news of all. You have more power over your next chapter than your previous disappointments taught you to believe. The future is not merely something that happens to you. It is something you meet through choices, courage, patience, boundaries, faith, and action. Don't skip, because the next revelation goes deeper than everything before it. The house suddenly becomes silent. The messenger is gone. The envelope remains in your hands. Archangel Michael stands at the far end of the hallway in this imagined spiritual scene, and behind him is a door you have never noticed before. Stay with me. This door was always there, but it blended into the wall because you were not ready to recognize it. There is no handle on your side. Only a small keyhole. Then you remember the symbol on the envelope, the key and the wing. You look down, and inside the envelope is something you somehow missed, a tiny golden key. Now the entire message changes. The surprising news coming into your house was never the final gift. It was carrying access to another door. Don't look away now. This is the once-in-a-lifetime revelation hidden beneath the title. Sometimes the news is not the destination, it is the key. A conversation can unlock courage. An opportunity can unlock a career path. A reconciliation can unlock understanding. An ending can unlock freedom. A new idea can unlock purpose. A moment of truth can unlock years of emotional confusion. The thing that arrives may matter enormously, but what it unlocks may matter even more. You place the key into the door. It fits perfectly. Yet before you turn it, you hesitate. Because behind that door lies the unknown, and even a beautiful unknown can feel intimidating when you have spent years learning the geography of familiar pain. Familiarity can disguise itself as safety. People sometimes remain emotionally attached to old stories not because those stories are good, but because they know every room inside them. A new story has no map. It requires trust. It requires movement. It requires becoming a beginner again. What comes next changes everything. You turn the key. There is a click. The door opens only an inch. Light slips through. And here is the mystery, you cannot see the room beyond it yet. You can only see enough for the next step.